Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Commodity TV and a new edition of our virtual online interviews. We want to get an update from Targa Exploration, and Cameron Tymstra, the CEO, is here with us. Good morning to Canada. How are you?
Good morning, Jochen. I'm well. How are you?
Good, good. All fine, thanks. Great to see you. Targa Exploration, interesting small company by now, but you guys are in for lithium in Canada. And looks really interesting, I would say, because you just had, I think it was on the 18th October, that you have completed your fieldwork at Opinaca lithium exploration project. So please comment a bit on that.
Yeah, so we were very fortunate to actually get into the property this year. As I'm sure you were aware, there were a lot of forest fires in the Quebec James Bay region this year, and that prevented a lot of companies, including ourselves, from actually gaining access to the properties. The government had sort of a ban on field work in a lot of those areas, and it was very difficult once that ban was lifted to even get access to helicopters since they were so busy fighting the forest fires elsewhere. And in fact, a forest fire ran right across our Opinaca project and completely torched the whole thing, which not so great for the environment, but certainly good for us because it makes actually doing field work quite a bit easier. It removes a lot of that brush. We can see the outcrops a lot more easily. Our field crews can walk their lines.
I think you have also an interesting image here on your news, right? The figure 3. That's amazing. The guy is standing in roasted trees, but you see demineralization here. It's amazing.
Yeah, it makes it easier to see from the helicopters as well. So when they're looking for outcrop, because that area where we have Opinaca, there's not a lot of bedrock exposure. There's a lot of till coverage. So the main component of our fieldwork this year was doing an extensive deep till sampling program. So we took almost 1,000 till samples across the entire property. We covered probably about 30 kilometers in length by about 5 or 6 kilometers in width across the property there, doing lines spaced every kilometer apart. The purpose of that is to really get an idea of what is below the surface there. So we're certainly looking for, obviously, things like lithium highs in those samples, looking for tantalum, looking for cesium and rubidium, all those key indicator elements for those lithium, cesium, tantalum type pegmatite deposits that we're looking for there. And then in addition to doing the till sampling program, our field crews there, our geotechnicians also, made note of some of those pegmatites at outcrop, like the one you're mentioning in that photograph there. They did take some samples of that to bring back for us that we're going to be sending to the lab. But what we really liked about seeing those samples was some of the mineralogy of those pegmatites that indicate that they are sort of in the LCT type family, and they do come from an S-type granite, which is the type of granite that we need to have in order to generate these LCT type pegmatites that we're looking for.
Okay, so what would be then the next step after that when this comes back from the lab? Could you already generate the drill targets through that?
Potentially, if we do see some really anomalous areas with good lithium and cesium values from that till sampling program, that could indicate that there is potentially a lithium-rich pegmatite below that till there. We'd probably go back in the field first to try to find some outcrop in those areas to confirm that. If the till is quite shallow, we could potentially do some trenching as well to try to identify the sources of those before bringing, obviously, a more expensive drill program in there. But it's certainly possible that we could identify some really high targets just based on this till sampling program alone. Next year, we'd like to do a more extensive mapping program to try to identify some more outcrop around the lake shores where there's higher potential to find outcrop, just so we can get a little bit more of a confirmation of what's below the surface before we bring in a drill program. But we're certainly hoping that the till sampling program we completed this year helps us narrow down the best areas for the project to continue our search.
Okay, super. And do you have the money to do so?
We'll be raising
those times not easy.
We'll be raising some money for those programs for next year. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, super. And this is just in the making? I thought you raised some money already, right?
We did raise some money this summer. We raised about $1.3 million. That covered all of our field expenses for not only our Opinaca project, but the other work that we did at Ngava, at Leaf River, and at Mascaro earlier this summer as well. We've also been doing just a little bit of field work at our projects in Ontario, which are road accessible. So the cost of doing that work is much, much cheaper because we can just drive to the projects and stay locally in a motel, which is nicer than putting up a camp at the side of the road in the middle of nowhere. And we've also just flown a LiDAR survey over our projects in Manitoba as well. So we didn't have a chance to actually get in the field to those two projects. They're both fly-in projects. But what's great about those is they're historic known spodumene occurrences on both of those projects, both of which have some historical drill results as well. So we're very excited to get into those projects next year. So in preparation for that, we flew some LiDAR and some ortho photography of those sites so we can better identify targets and make some more concrete plans for next year's field season.
Okay, super. Yeah, I saw also in one of your press releases, I think it was from 4th October, that you also acquired lithium projects in Quebec and Ontario. So that was totaling, I think, 137,000 hectares, and the total portfolio is 412,000 hectares. Jesus, how do you manage that? Aside of your fantastic advisory report, which we will talk in a second about.
Well, certainly that new advisory board we put together with John Robbins, Leo Hathaway, and Craig Perry, they're going to be a lot of help for us going forward in terms of putting together our strategy for how we assess this large portfolio that we have and how we hone in on the most prospective regions. So we're making sure we get the most bang for our buck for the dollars that we spend in the field. We don't want to be sending crews out to areas that are of low prospectivity. This year, the work that we did at 3 of our other projects in Quebec included mostly just running sort of mapping lines across the projects, sampling the rocks as we go, because a lot of these areas have not had a lot of historic exploration work on them. So the data that we have, the geological data, is very sparse. So we've been generating our own geological maps for those projects. So next season, we know only to go into the areas that look most prospective for us. So we can kind of narrow down from something like a 50,000 hectare project, maybe to just the 5,000 hectares that are most prospective, and spend our phase 2 money in those areas. And so that's what we'll be doing for all of our land packages kind of over the course of the winter, assessing the results from this summer, determining which areas are the most prospective and where we'll be going next year.
Yeah, that's also one of my next questions. Have you access like year round, meaning can you work year round, or is it better for you to say maybe in the winter we pause for 1 or 2 months?
Yeah, for the grassroots work that we're doing on most of our properties, we certainly need them to be snow free so we can see the rocks on the ground. Things like LiDAR and a lot of aerial surveys, it's preferable to also have it snow free. So most of our projects, we won't be going to them in the winter. In the future, once we're at the drilling phase, we can drill year round in most of these projects, so we could certainly drill in the wintertime. In some areas, that's actually preferred. Areas that are maybe kind of swampy, once the ground freezes, it's actually easier to get a drill rig in there than it is in the summer. So certainly probably next winter, we may be doing more work in the field. We've recently had some discussions about using some of the winter months to analyze some hyperspectral survey data from satellites that's already been historically collected. That's being used more frequently now to try to identify specific minerals and pegmatites that are exposed at surface, particularly things like spodumene. So we'll be working with those potentially over the winter as well, doing some of that to do a little bit of data analysis and again sort of refine what areas we're going to go to once the spring season hits.
Okay, super. I saw also Kenorland will be like a 9.9% shareholder. How did that come, and who are other large shareholders, and what is management share, of course?
Of course, yes. So Kenorland Minerals, we acquired our Opinaca project from them at the end of last year. We also acquired our 2 historic spodumene sources in Manitoba last year as well. So those 3 projects came from Kenorland. So they received about, I think it was about 4.4 million shares last year for that. And as part of our purchase agreement with them, any new shares that we issue as part of a financing, they receive 9.9% of those issued shares. So they're not currently 9.9% shareholders because we've issued a number of shares for other property acquisitions, and we don't give them a piece of that. We only give them a percent of the shares issued for financings. So their total shareholding right now is probably around 5.5 million shares, which would probably be about maybe 6% of our outstanding share count. But other large shareholders we have would be Sean Ryan and his group of prospectors. We issued a number of shares to them earlier this year for the 3 projects that we acquired from them in Quebec. That's Ngava, Leaf River, and Mascaro. We also worked with Sean's field team through ground truth exploration to do our field season work on those projects this year, which were very successful. Our other major shareholders are now also going to be the likes of John Robbins and Leo Hathaway, some of our key new advisors there, as we did acquire some projects from them that we just recently talked about there in Quebec and Ontario as well. So the shares that we issued to those prospectors in that group are very considerable shareholders. And the bulk of the other shareholders are a lot of the gentlemen from the Inventa Capital group there. Those key principals, those co-founders that you're familiar with, Craig Perry being one of them, who's also one of our new advisors for Targa Exploration. So myself too, and the rest of our management team are pretty significant shareholders in Targa.
Okay, super. So yeah, thanks for the insight, and I have a good feeling that we talk quite soon when you have the next results here. And yeah, please keep us posted.
Of course, Jochen, thank you very much. Hopefully we'll speak in November when we start getting results from the field.
Yeah, that would be really interesting. I look forward to that. Thank you very much. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, that was Cameron Tymstra, the CEO of Targa Exploration. Yeah, you heard it. The setup is done over 412,000 hectares of land, prospective land in Canada, in some of the best regions in Canada for lithium, which is the main target here, lithium pegmatite. And yeah, I think this is really interesting. Aside, lithium prices show something different, but to be honest, I get more and more the impression that lithium prices are a bit manipulated because it makes absolutely no sense. We are building more and more electric cars and we need more lithium for batteries, and definitely we need it from stable and secure regions. That's exactly where Targa is working. So check out the company. Thanks for watching us, and we look forward to the update in November. Bye bye from Switzerland.